Hello, my name's Yahtzee Croshaw. I'm a British expat living in America. So obviously it's my job to teach you how to remember all 50 states. We start in the top left, and because George Washington was the first president, that's also the very first state. It wasn't Washington's state of origin, but it is immediately north of Oregon, which sounds a bit like origin. Just to the right of those, you'll note a big state at the top that appears to be having doggy-style sex with the state southwest of it, whispering sweet nothings into its ear throughout. Why is one state mounting the other? Because it's Montana. Why is the other state being mounted? Because it's a hoe. Idaho, it might say. You probably don't need help remembering California. It's that big turd in the bottom left. When I was a kid, my dad took us on a trip to America. And being a huge tourist, as well as an insufferable prat, he took us to Disneyland, the Grand Canyon, and Las Vegas, respectively in California, Arizona, and Nevada. And that's how I remember California, Arizona, and Nevada are all grouped together within incredibly boring driving distance. Having lived in California for a while, I have come to know Nevada as that place you head towards if you want to go skiing. And if you really want to go skiing, you go even further to the next state along, which is Utah. You want to go skiing? Oh yes, tar very much. Now there's an incredibly boring state chipping away Utah's northeast corner that's a perfect rectangle. Why? Oh, because it's Wyoming. And there's another perfect rectangle right below it, which being the more centralized one, probably starts with a C, Colorado. And right below that, New Mexico, which had to climb up a bunch of stairs to get on top of Old Mexico, and that's why the bottom part of it looks like stairs. It's also immediately to the west of Texas. You fucking know which one's Texas. It's the big weird one that looks like the result of a serious malfunction at the souvenir mug factory. And Oklahoma is the state that's gotten so sick of Texas it stuck its thumb out so it can hitchhike away from it. Now, I'm far from the first person to have noticed that some of the states in the middle look like they take the shape of a baker standing in profile and wearing a chef's hat. The hat is Minnesota, because if you take the last two letters of Minnesota and turn them backwards, you get at, which is how you say hat if you're from East London. The face is Iowa, which has the same number of letters as face. The shirt is Missouri, Miss Shirt-y, and the pants are Arkansas, pants-or. The boot is Louisiana, and I don't really have a system for that one except to remember that Louisiana is that state shaped like a boot. Now this baker has taken a hot tray out of the oven, and if some water were to drip on it, it would go see, because it's Tennessee. And what's that on the tray? It's a lovely piece of Kentucky Fried Chicken. The steam rising off of the Kentucky Fried Chicken is Indiana, because when you smell it, it makes you go, Indian? Ah, because you're stupid. If the baker were to break wind, it would pop out of the top of Arkansas and form a rectangular fart bubble just above Oklahoma, and when you smell it, you go, Kansas, because you've forgotten how to pronounce Arkansas. But that does help you remember that that's Kansas, and just north of that is Nebraska. And we know it's Nebraska because Nebraska's the only central state we haven't identified yet, besides North and South Dakota. But Nebraska isn't either of those, because South Dakota has to be immediately south of North Dakota, and North Dakota has to be right at the top, because it's north. Now we reach the Great Lakes area, the most central of the lakes being Michigan, and the state of Michigan is the one that's split in half by the lake. Wisconsin is on the west of the lake, going, why, Wisconsin? Why doesn't the top part of Michigan count as part of me? Seems like it really should. And the last state that borders Lake Michigan is Illinois, which is very ill and very annoyed that I don't have an easy way to remember it. Getting back to the baker's boot, Louisiana, why is this state so weirdly shaped? Because it uses the Mississippi River as its eastern border, and that's how you know Mississippi is immediately to the east. Right after that we have the two best friends, Al and George, Alabama and Georgia, standing side by side on a nice solid Florida. Nestled comfortably in the triangle between Georgia and Tennessee are North and South Carolina, which you'll remember because there's a North one and a South one. And right above those are Virginia and West Virginia, which you'll remember because there's a West one and a not West one. And now we get to all the fiddly little states in the northeast. Hey, not quite, Yahtzee. You've forgotten about that fat blobby one just east of Indiana. Oh, hi, Ohio. How could I possibly forget you? Especially when you're the one holding a great big novelty pencil with a broken end, named Pennsylvania. Just north of that you'll find New York, which is easy to remember. It's a great big triangle of bugger all, with a little piddly afterthought dangling off the bottom right that happens to contain the most important and well-known city in the fucking world. Now, the one thing everyone knows about Rhode Island is that it's the smallest state. So small that New York uses it as a bellend. But how is it connected to New York? Why, with Connecticut, of course, the shaft of New York's prodigious penis. And Massachusetts is the state just above them, because Massachusetts is what normal words sound like when you try to say them with New York's cock in your mouth. There's two vaguely triangular states above that, and the one on the left looks like a V because it's Vermont, and the one on the right is New Hampshire because it looks like an N. Okay, no it doesn't, but it looks more like an N than it does a V, so we know it's not Vermont. Maine is the last one in the queue there, its last two letters being N-E, and that's how you remember it's the northeasternmost state. Or perhaps you could just remember that that one's Maine. It's like one syllable, you lazy twat. Moving back down south, we know New Jersey has to be right under New York because once New York has finished dribbling cum all over you from its big penis, a New Jersey is exactly what you're gonna need. And right under that is another piddling little state one would hardly be aware of if I hadn't pointed it out, and that's how you know it's Delaware. The rest of that horrible shape northeast of Virginia is Maryland, because it makes you go, Mary, Jesus and Joseph, that's a weirdly shaped state. And that's all the continental states, unless we want to tokenly acknowledge Washington, D.C., which is technically a state, even though it's basically just one city straddling the border between Virginia and Maryland. Actually, Virginia is famously named after Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, whose predecessor was her sister, Mary I, so there you go. Picture a boxing match with Elizabeth on the left and Mary on the right, and George Washington refereeing in the middle. Go on, Mary, land a punch on that virgin ear. And that's it, except for the last two states that always appear in insets on the map. Well, the Pacific Islands are Hawaii, which is the one state that sounds like the name of a Pacific island, you idiot. And then there's that last one awkwardly hanging off the side of Canada like a mostly dislodged hat. What's that one called again? I can never remember. Hang on, I think my wife knows. I'll ask her. Oh, fuck off.